going to talk about culture war now. And what we're seeing actually with all these riots across the country. I was about to say in LA, but across the country, Seattle, all over, everywhere. What's going on in this country? How is all this happening? So allow me to explain. Because actually Walmart, or actually one of the Walmart heiresses, Chrissy Walton, she provided maybe the most wonderful possible example. Now, this woman is by, any stretch, the elite of the elite. Billionaire. High society. She hasn't flown commercial probably once in her entire life. It's private planes and 5-star resorts and whatnot. And she came up in a country living in the wealth provided by the country. Her family made it big. The Walton family made it huge. Walmart. They made it huge, selling their goods in the United States of America. Now they're all billionaires. I forgot what the number was last time I looked, how many billionaires now are in the Walton family. It's just billions and billions and billions and billions and billions. Well, she takes an ad out, a full-page ad in the New York Times. Not cheap, by the way, but it's pocket change for her. Takes an ad out calling for people to protest, essentially. Rise up against Donald Trump. Now, this is what we're going to focus on here for a few minutes. What has happened? How did we get where we are? Why are we turning on the television, looking on our phones, and we see a new riot every single day? Well, it's actually not the bottom. It can be tempted because those are the animals in the streets throwing bricks, lighting things on fire, hurting people. It can be tempting to look at the socioeconomic bottom of the society and say it's their fault. And don't get me wrong, they're responsible, but it's not actually their fault. Here's what happened in America, and here's why the culture war is a war that is still ongoing and will be ongoing. It's not that we lost the socioeconomic bottom. In general, and remember, I want to clarify something. If any of this offends you, I don't care. In general, the masses, the socioeconomic bottom, they will go where the money is. They'll go, essentially, for lack of a better word, where they are led. They will go where they are led. They will group up and they will seek out money. They will seek out guidance from people. It's the elites in our country who have destroyed our country. And how did that happen? The education system. It all comes back to the education system. You see, what happens is, especially in wealthy circles, it's very, very common in wealthy circles for the children of uber wealthy people who made it, who really made it, the children will turn out to be vicious commies. Did you know historically how many communist leaders were rich kids? It's almost all of them. Did you know that? They don't put that on the brochure. When you read about things like Che, Lenin, Mao, you think to yourself, well, they were obviously peasants who rose up and led the peasants in rebellion. That's almost never the case. They were all rich kids, every single one of them. Rich kids who grew up wealthy. And look, there's a million different psychological reasons we could probably dig into. But instead of choosing to better the lives of others, maybe it's the lack of challenges they had growing up, they seek out a purpose. And the bad ones land on communism. And they see their purpose in life as leading the unwashed masses in revolution against the very society that made them wealthy. Bringing me back to America's elites. It goes well beyond Chrissy Walton. You see, they took over the education system in this country, and most importantly, it's not that lower education, I'm talking about K through 12, it's not that that's not important, but most importantly, they took over higher education and the elite higher education. It's not just that they went to the local state school, it's not just Louisiana State. They took over Harvard, Yale, Stanford. And once they took over these elite institutions, I'm talking the professors, all communists, administrators, all communists, they would bring in all these children of privilege, and they would tell them, you'd sit there day after day being lectured by this filthy commie professor. You have your privilege because you need to burn America down. Why don't you lead? And they led. They leave college, they get their inheritance, they get their vast quantities of wealth, and instead of using it to better the lives of others, to give back, even expand their businesses, they use it to burn America down. When you talk about the riots, we always talk about communist street activism in this country, from LA to Seattle, wherever it may be happening right now. We always talk about how it's paid for and organized, and oftentimes it's paid for by you. The times it's not paid for by the American taxpayer, it's paid for almost universally by uber wealthy children of privilege. And the ones who don't flat out stroke a check to this riot group or that riot group, they have the legal know-how, because they all have an army of lawyers and accountants, to figure out, how do I start a communist front group that'll do communist activism without it coming back on me? Have you ever wondered why we can't trace the source of the money in so many of these instances? We have the ultimate journalists now, internet sleuths, who go through documents and they'll run into firewalls over and over and over again. Why? Because uber wealthy people with $1,000 an hour lawyers set up the nonprofits. The elites create these organizations who then have other organizations who have other organizations, so they can funnel money, theirs and taxpayer money, to the animals on the streets. And that's why pallets of bricks show up almost on call as soon as they need a riot. And the elites guide these riots, encourage these riots. An heiress, a billionaire, taking out a full-page article in the New York Times. Nancy Pelosi, as powerful as it gets, says things like this.
And I say this as a former party chair, when there is a gathering, a large gathering of people, the anarchists see it as an opportunity and they move in. So always have to be careful whether you see a burned car or broken window or whatever it is. It may be the exuberance of the moment, but it may be the anarchist setting in. I heard one of the former police chiefs of Los Angeles speak about this on Sunday.
That's Grandma Vodka. Couple shots in, doing the best she can. It's not Democrats. It's not our people. It's these anarchist types. Why do they do that? Why do they make excuses for them? Why do they call for more action and act as if they're part of the group like Chris Murphy did?
And obviously, this is a moment where we have to be on the streets all over the country to protest what's happening to our immigrant community, but more broadly to protest what's happening to our democracy. This is the most corrupt administration in the history of the country, and we are going to rise to this moment by being out there on the streets.
United States Senators, the most corrupt administration ever. We have to be in the streets, get in the streets. He mentioned the streets several times. We've got to get to the streets. Chris Murphy's never been in the streets in his life, but Chris Murphy understands he's leading a mob, an angry, violent mob of street animals. Therefore, he has to use the language of the angry, violent mob of street animals. He knows, in the end, he's commanding an army, for lack of a better way to put it, an army of freaks.
But I have a kid. If I don't, and these people are having their children taken and their parents. What about my kids? Then what happens to my kids? I can't help it. But you can if you could just move off the land. You're not going to. How is this a peaceful protest if there's nothing to do? No, it's not.
How do you all as white people feel about stopping a black woman from going to work?
Oh no, not work. I care so much.
So you don't care about stopping black people from going to work?
Look at this line that you guys are causing. I'm not causing no problems. I'm not trying to. We're just trying to leave.
You saw that drugged out lunatic right there. Oh, no, at work. You saw the lesbian beside him with her eyes bugged out, lecturing somebody as always. Well, these are the Democrat constituents. These are the street animals. If you're asking, maybe you were sitting there as we played Nancy Pelosi and Chris Murphy. Maybe you're sitting there wondering, well, who would listen to those two freaks? Who's going to heed the call to take to the streets from these losers? Well, those losers. as we've talked about 100 times on this show, there are two different divisions of communism: elite communist scum and street communist scum. The streets get their orders from the elites. The elites give those orders, and they send out the army of animals to go do their bidding. That's why we are where we are. And before we wrap this up, I want to give credit where credit is due. Donald Trump has taken a lot of flack in the past for lacking humility in places where he screwed up. Look, I've given him crap in the past, COVID, all that other stuff, where he doesn't seem like he's going to own the mistake. Donald Trump is deploying the National Guard. He's sending in the Marines, and Donald Trump sounds like a man who has learned.
You have to remember, I've been here before, and I went right by every rule, and I waited for governors to say, send in the National Guard. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it, and they just wouldn't do it. It kept going on and on, got worse and worse. And in Minneapolis, that city was burning down. It was 7 days, and I said, I don't care. This guy wouldn't call the National Guard, and we ultimately just sent in the National Guard. We stopped it, but that was after 7 days. And I said to myself, if that stuff happens again, we've got to make faster decisions because they don't want to do it. The radical left, it's usually radical left, and it's usually governors that are Democrat, and they don't want to call them in. They don't want to save lives. They don't want to save property. They don't want to call them in. I don't know what it is.
Good for Donald Trump. Good for him for cracking down immediately. We have quite a war ahead of us. All right. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I am right. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.